How's it going, guys? I'm currently working on a Hyundai Accent. I'm bringing it for a test drive. The customer has advised me that the engine management light is on, which it is, and at times it starts to flash. When it's under load, it starts to what seems like misfire a lot more. So we're going to do a diagnostic on this. I'm going to bring it back to the workshop now, plug it in, see what the fault codes are, and start to find a solution for this problem. It's a 2012, it's a 1.6 Hyundai Accent. It's a sedan. Okay, so we have 3 fault codes logged related to cylinder 1, cylinder 2 and a random multiple misfire. So first thing I'm going to do is do a swap test. I'm going to start to move around some items and I'm going to clear these codes. I'm going to clear these codes first. And when I speak about a swap test, I'm talking about moving one item to another cylinder. So moving ignition coils if they're interchangeable from different cylinders, and the same with spark plugs. This is a very simple and effective way of doing a diagnostic, especially when you have specific cylinder fault codes stored. So I take off the top cover. After I have that removed, I then just clean up the top. There was some oil spillage from someone previously in there, topping up the oil probably. After I have that cleaned up, I set about marking the ignition coils because I want to know which ones I'm swapping to which cylinder, making it very clear afterwards on results. So number 1, 2, 3 and 4 are marked. I check the connectors, and straight away I noticed that number 1 is not connected right. It wasn't attached, and after inspection of the other ones I could see that the retaining clip was broken. So number 1 retaining clip, the plastic tab that holds it in, had broken away. This leaves me very certain that number 1 was caused by that fault. I checked the rest of them, but under load that would have been vibrating, and that's why you would have 2 misfires when it was under acceleration and the engine vibrating. I then disconnect all the other connectors on the harness. You pull back a tab and then you push in. So you pull back on the grey, push in on the clip and remove them. And I start removing the 10 mils that hold in the ignition coils. I'm using my SP Tools impact gun for that, and I take them up. I check the condition of them all visibly. I look inside them and make sure that the connectors haven't become detached. Sometimes the spark plug where they locate in can be damaged. Also, when you're in there, you check to see if any tube seals of the rocker cover is leaking, see if there's any oil around them. That's why you see me tapping on the top of them. Sometimes you get some oil on the very top of the ignition coils on removal. Afterwards, it is swapping number 1 and 2 to 3 and 4. And even if you know it's the ignition coil at this stage, I would always recommend removing the spark plugs. The fact that you're in so far, you have a misfire either way. You want to check the condition of the tips of the spark plugs. You want to make sure that there's no fouling or the gaps are okay. And I set about removing them. Now I've inspected these, and for this demonstration I'm just going to be showing you how you would swap cylinders if you were doing this job. So number 1 I'm taking up now. Remember, that was a fault code and number 3 wasn't, so you could swap number 1 with number 3. And then number 2 was also a fault code, so you could swap number 2 with number 4. If either of those moved cylinders and you suspected the spark plugs were the fault, you would be easily able to tell by just doing that simple test, running the vehicle and seeing if the fault returns in a different cylinder. I tightened down the spark plugs and I am now on to the next stage of this job. I pop the ignition coils back. You can see number 1 is now in a position of number 4, 2 is where 3 was, 3 is where 2 was, and 4 is where 1 is. I don't like using my impact gun to tighten down components. I put them in by hand and then I use usually manual tools like my 1/4" ratchet. I reconnect up the electrical connectors on the ignition coil, and then just a tip, if you have any securing clips that's broken on any electrical components, you don't want to replace the whole harness, or you don't want to get a new connector and have to solder it up. You can use this cable tie technique that I use. If you go in between the wires with one and then you loop it back around on the underside with another, you can get a very secure connector onto the ignition coil or onto whatever component you're trying to connect it to. It also doesn't pull on the wiring. If you put it through the middle, it will use the base of the harness connector to secure it. So I just tension up on one side here, then I tension up on the cable side, and I now know that when I'm testing this I will have a firm connection and there will be no way that that will back off. Also, by using cable ties, you know that you can cut them off and you'll be able to remove the connector easily. Using any glues or any sealers like I've seen previously is not a good idea in my opinion. I'll just snip off the ends of the cable ties, and now I had the vehicle running for quite a while after this, and the cylinder 3 returned. Misfire.
So we now know the ignition coil needs to be replaced.
So with that information, I knew that the ignition coil needed to be replaced, so I take that up. Remember, that was number 2 previously. So number 2 jumped to number 3, and the ignition coil has failed. I had one ordered, and when it arrived I go and I swap it over. This is the new one being installed, and because I didn't get it on video earlier, I wanted to show you a strength, a spark condition test. So I use my tester here connected to a good earth, and that can show you a good spark, and the new coil is working like it should. I go in, I clear the fault codes, I put everything back together again, and this vehicle is now ready for a road test. I use my 1/4" drive again to tighten down the top plastic cover, and I set about bringing it for a road test.
I'm just doing a final road test on this vehicle now. We have cleared the codes. We monitored it when we had it in the workshop, made sure that no codes came back straight away. It hasn't returned. The vehicle is running good, so we know this problem has been rectified. If you have a misfire like that, there is a lot of different ways that you can check it. You can do the swap tests on the ignition coils if they're interchangeable, depending on what vehicle that you're doing it on. You can also swap spark plugs from one cylinder to another. A little trick is to not move the same spark plugs to the same cylinders when you're swapping the coils as well. That way you know if one cylinder has jumped to another or not. Also, you could see the spark condition test that I done. With the old coil that failed, there was no spark at all. With the new coil we were able to see a spark. So there's a lot of different checks you can do to find out why there is a misfire on your vehicle. That's just a few. This problem has been solved, and I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like, share, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.